My name is Matt Sparazza.
I'm Father Sam Kachuba. Welcome to The Tangent. Look at that. Look at you waiting.
Yeah,
Look at your
that's right.
patience.
I waited
It's so
this time.
good.
I didn't interrupt you this time. That's it.
Well,
We've
you
officially
just-
broken the record.
Yeah, you're so excited. It's great.
Yes,
Thrilled
yes.
today that we have Chris Altieri joining us. And Matt, you said this is the record-setting
Record-setting
guest
interview.
number, right?
Yes, sir.
That's amazing. Chris, welcome back.
Hey guys, great to be here.
Yep. Third time's the charm. The first two times, no good. No, that's not what I meant.
Come on.
Actually, your previous episodes are some of our most listened to episodes.
Oh wow,
So
that's
yeah. So not
Okay.
only are you a returning guest, but you are a returning and successful guest.
look at that. I'm a draw, fellas.
yes, and that's why we had you back. No.
That's funny, the you wouldn't think that from the correspondence I get from my from the editors that they pass along.
Well, you've just come out with a new book, Leo XIV, The New Pope and Catholic Reform. And I'm fascinated by the book, first off, because of how quickly you managed to write an entire book about a pope who has been pope for not quite 6 months. So can we talk about that first? Just the
Sure.
process of writing a book so quickly.
Well, I received an overture from Dominic Matos at Bloomsbury Continuum, who was looking for someone who could turn around a biography of the new pope. And I told him that I couldn't do a biography. In fact, I told him that I don't think anybody could. Turns out I wasn't quite right about that, but because my friend and colleague Elise Allen, who had the inside track, has done an excellent biography, but she had the pieces in place to be able to do it, and the contacts in Peru where he spent a lot of years and all of those things. What I pitched, and I highly recommend that. It's not out in English yet, but it will be in early 2026. So there's another one to look out for, and that is a really in-depth biography, and a remarkable piece of work.
But no one should buy that book before yours. I just want to be very clear. Your book first.
Well, look, what I said was what I can do is give you a biographical sketch, but I think that it will be much more useful to have a look at the state of the church. I could tell you about the mind of the cardinals going into the conclave. And not just the electors, but also the people who were over 80 and not voting, but contributing to the consultations and deliberations ahead of the conclave. And I could take a look at the papal in tray and say, look, what's he want? Whoever they have picked, what was the guy walking into, and how would that inform their choice, right? And so I somewhat cheekily, but only somewhat, I say, I feel a little bit like, you guys ever had to DIY something around the house, or tried to DIY something around the house,
Sure.
and you bang your head against it and you can't figure it out, and finally you throw the gun down and call the plumber, and he comes in and he sticks a stethoscope against the wall, bangs something with a wrench twice, and he's there for maybe 10 minutes, and a month later you get a bill for $1,000.
Okay, maybe I haven't done it quite like that. But,
You're not you're not paying him for his 10 minutes, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying him for the 25 years he spent on the job, which allowed him to do the thing in 10 minutes. And that is the real reason I was able to get this turned around as quickly as I did.
I like the approach that you took here, recognizing that the trying to come up with a biography would be virtually impossible so quickly, and that this relatively unknown cardinal, to try to put together a comprehensive biography without also experiencing something of his time as Pope would really just be a non-starter. So instead, you took the approach of let's get the sketch, understanding kind of where he comes from, what the state of the church is, and see what might we be able to expect. Now, you've given some indicators here about the state of the church. Let's just talk about what you see as the state of the church going into the conclave, and even has that state changed? Has anything shifted just in these months since Leo XIV was elected?
And even before that, if you could also, because you said, the reason you were able to do it was because of your previous experience. So if you could give like the elevator pitch of your previous experience,
yeah, that's good.
That allowed you to do this.
Well, yeah, I mean, the short version of a 25-year long story is that I went to Rome in the mid-late 1997.
The year I was born.
for grad school.
Sorry.
And
I know that was unkind. I apologize.
And I met a girl. Right?
Yeah, all right.
And stayed there, lived there, got a job in 2005 at Vatican Radio. And I had done, a little bit of special reporting and some piecework for local papers back here, actually. Joe Pisani who was at the Stanford Advocate at the time.
Sure.
And I emailed him when, when it looked like John Paul II was going to breathe his last, and said, look, you've got somebody local here in town if you'd want anything. And I did a few things for him over the next year or so. In the meantime, started at Vatican Radio. And if memory serves, I was supposed to start there in the spring, but they decided they didn't want to be training up the new guy with everything that was happening in the spring of 2005. So I started, in the summer when things had calmed down a little bit. And I liked it. And a permanent slot opened up in late August or early September of that year, and I took it and ran with it. Was there for a dozen years. More than that, actually, just a little bit more than that. Eventually came to realize that it was, time to move on. It's always an honor to be in the service of the Holy Father and the Holy See, and it wasn't one that I put down lightly, but it was time to go do other things. I was looking to be away from the 24-hour news cycle, or at least to be not to be the one chasing stories. But it happened that, my last broadcast was December 31st, 2017. The evening news broadcast that day. I walked out of the studio and went home and, spent some time with the family. And, a couple of weeks later, Francis went to Chile. And not to put too fine a point on it, he essentially, He pulled the pin on the abuse and cover-up hand grenade and dropped it in his own lap. And there was this, around that time, it was the Bishop Barros scandal, which folks may remember.
Admittedly, I don't. So this is before my time, and I don't want to go. I say before my time as in before I was paying attention to these things. And if it's way too long of a tangent, feel free to just skim over it and go past it. But if it's a short tangent...
I feel like the lid is up on this can of worms now.
Could we do a thing where I test my memory of Chris Altieri copy in the past and see how well I can summarize, and then you tell me if I got it right?
We can put a little check mark in the corner.
All right, yeah. Let's try this.
We'll make this a little... I mean, it's a very serious situation, but I think this could be interesting. So, if I recall correctly, we're talking about Barros, right?
Yeah,
Bishop Barros was the bishop of Osorno in Chile.
that's correct.
Okay, that's one for me. And he was accused of covering up the abuse of Father Francisco Caradima. Father Fernando Caradima, but I got the last name right.
Caradima, yeah, and
all right, I'll take a half point on that.
He wasn't just some guy, right? He was a celebrity cleric, powerful, knew everybody, bit of something of a kingmaker too, right? Wasn't a bishop himself, but there were several of his proteges, among them Barros, who had risen.
I see.
And so in the sweeping this under the rug, ignoring the pleas of victims, then when Francis got to Chile, is this where he said that the people who were making these accusations were not just speaking without charity, but were actually guilty of slander or calumny or something like that?
Calumny was the word.
Calumny.
Calumnia, yeah. And he said they don't have any proof. They haven't brought me any proof, right? And it was a difficult situation for him because the three men who were survivors and reform advocates, who were the accusers of Barros, it was on the strength of their testimony that Caradima had been convicted. And they were the ones who saying, we saw him do these things. So it's eyewitness testimony is what they brought him. Now that's, and it's tough for the Pope to say, well, that's not worth anything, which is essentially what he said. Later on, he walked it back. But at that point, the damage was done. And what I was seeing was there was a lot of talk in the press in those days of the horror and the insensitivity toward victims, and I didn't think that was wrong as far as it went, but there were serious structural and there were serious problems of governance that the episode raised, and I don't think that the full either the import or the real purport of what of Francis not only saying it to a press gaggle, but then several days later on the plane back doubling down. Really, I didn't think that folks were quite seeing it. So I said, all right, I'm going to write one piece. It's going to be just a straight explainer. Here's what happened. Here's why it's important. This is what it means, right? And I did that, and the long story made short of that is that I went from there to filing, 2-3 times a week, sometimes more than that, for like the next 80 weeks. It was nuts.
Yeah.
And ended up becoming the Rome bureau chief and international editor, and then executive editor for a while at the Catholic Herald, and doing some pretty major investigations, and that, I suppose, brings us up to the rough present. So, I spent more than a dozen years at Vatican Radio, nearly a full quarter century in Rome, and the last, I don't know, maybe going on 10 years now, getting myself systematically disinvited from all of the ecclesiastical cocktail parties.
I like that. Systematically
Which was the
disinvited.
goal all along.
Yeah.
Well done.
Who needs another rubber chicken dinner, right? I mean, but so here, I think this is important. So prior to this book, we've also got your book Into the Storm, which really covers that whole year of 2018, which is a pretty wild time when you think about it. Starting with Barros and then moving to and folks go and buy the book, you'll see the full story, the full depth of it. But then you go from Barros in Chile to Argentina and Zanqueta, and then you come to the United States with McCarrick. What we start to see is that the problem of abuse, of course, it's massive and it's horrible. It's a horrifying thing that we have to face in the life of the church. But that there's exactly what you're saying here, Chris. The governance problems that are there also, and it's really important to raise that issue and to investigate what's going on in the governance. So, at the risk of glossing over lots of other important points here, which I'm sure we'll go back and cover at some point, let's bring this all into all of this is necessary background for the state of the church that Pope Leo is now leading. This is all the necessary background of these are the things that were going on in the years leading up to the beginning of the pontificate of Leo XIV. And I think it's very important that you include this notion of reform in the title of your book. So what are you seeing as the state of the church and the places where that reform is most needed that Leo's going to have to tackle?
Well, there are three areas, right? There is reform, and each one is applicable or has a field or a theater, right? That is the field or theater of the Vatican. To the extent, and in the book I talk about why that the Vatican doesn't really exist. It's journalistic shorthand for the Roman Curia, which is, I think I've said in copy, the folks in Byzantium look at the way that Rome is organized, and they talk about Roman bureaucracy the way that we talk about Byzantine bureaucracy. It's a complex organism, but at the same time, it's basically a very big and very old chancery. It's existed in some form ever since St. Peter looked over one of his shoulders and said, "Somebody take a letter," That's what it is. But it's there, and it's part of the church, and it's the church's central governing apparatus. As any bureaucracy, it can be better or worse at what it does, but it can't be debureaucratized. And I'll say more about that. But there's the reform of the governing apparatus. It was a major project, by the way, under Francis, who I think it's fair to say did not put the system, did not put the Curia in form for action in the 21st century. Whether his reforms were ill-conceived and poorly executed, or whether they were brilliantly conceived but imperfectly realized, doesn't matter. It's we're going to need to wait a while for historians to argue that out. But there's work to do there, especially within the comms apparatus, and but not exclusively there. And the communications apparatus in the Vatican has been a shambles for a long time. I know. I used to work in it. And it's not the fault primarily of the people who are actually doing the work or trying to. There is a communications culture within the Vatican that needs to change. One of the things that people don't realize, for example, is only a very few of the Vatican departments, the dicasteries of the Roman Curia, even have their own comms desks. And the heads of dicasteries don't talk very often to one another. Just on Monday, we received news that there are plans being put in place ahead of the consistory that's slated for January 7th and 8th. One of the things that Leo is doing is pushing, it appears, for more regular interdicasterial communication. That's, by the way, something that I say he could have a look at doing in the book. So, we'll see how that unfolds, but I said he might do it, and it looks like he's doing it. That's not to say he read the book. You didn't need to be you didn't need to be a genius to figure that one out. Anyway, the big areas are, besides comms, internal, ad intra and ad extra, as we say, right? Internal communication and communication to the wider world. That's something that you got to get right. And you have to get it right because the whole purpose of the church is to communicate the divine life to mankind, right? So comms failures are never just comms failures when it comes to the church. It's mission critical.
I like that way of saying it, Matt. Make sure you clip that. That's a really important one.
I just marked it.
Yes.
Then you have, the fact is that the Vatican is insolvent.
Financially.
Insolvent,
right?
Yeah. And even if you can fudge the paper on that, they're spending more than they're bringing in, and have been, doing deficit spending and using, burning through principle and burning through capital, and you can't do that forever. You just can't, right? So he's going to have to find a way to firm up the financial footing of the outfit. I think I remember saying, I was live to air on the day of his election, and I got a question about what I thought his priorities were going to be, and I mentioned that one, and the folks were wondering more about whether he would be what were the doctrinal issues, and I tried to steer away from that by simply making the point that, look, the church, the teaching of the church is clear, and doctrine has a way of working itself out, but the lights don't stay on by themselves. Somebody's got to keep the lights on and the wheels turning, right? Anyone who's been the pastor of a parish knows that.
I can
hi,
speak
Father
to
Sam.
such.
Nice to see you. Hey,
yeah, I can speak to such concerns that yes, you do have to keep the lights on.
So
how else are you going to have a worldwide podcast?
Yeah.
And then there is there's reform of justice, and that I think is by far the most important, and it's a gargantuan task.
Yeah.
And one that I don't know that church leaders around the world are really sensible of the persistent deleterious effect of the failures of ecclesiastical justice are on the faithful and on the clergy.
Yes.
And it's a real bind, because one of the problems is that that ecclesiastical justice is not independent either of the local bishop or of the Roman pontiff.
Yeah.
And Francis, especially in the case that dominated headlines for years at the end of his pontificate, the case of a fellow named Marco Rupnik, right? Not only that case, but it was just an excruciating thing to watch unfold over several years toward the end of Francis's reign and was unfinished business, is unfinished business. It was impossible to escape the impression. In fact, we know that people were putting their fingers on the scales of justice, and you can't fix that sort of problem by putting your fingers on the scales of justice, right?
Right.
How
do you make a distinction between ecclesiastical justice and governance? Are they one and the same? Do they diverge? How do you approach that?
It is the thorniest question with which to wrestle, because it's hard enough to supervise the conduct of justice when you have a functioning administration, right? The church doesn't right now have one, and that's again not a knock on the people who are actually in the office doing the work. All right, but there are, I think, 17 guys employed full time in the discipline office at DDF, and that's an office with a worldwide billet for an organization that has well over 1 billion members and about 500,000 clerics of both secular and religious. They don't have exclusive competence over all cases, and they're not directly responsible for all cases, but either directly or indirectly, they're responsible for certainly abuse cases against minors, in many cases against vulnerable adults, which is a whole nother area, right, where the church really needs to catch up.
And so bureaucracy that's understaffed like that is going to go slower and slower, and that means justice is delayed further and further, longer and longer, and justice delayed is, as you say,
justice
often,
denied.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly,
and just the other day, Leo, asked point blank about the Rupnik case. He acknowledged that yes, it's very difficult to ask victims to be patient. Right. And he's not wrong about that. But he's going to have to resist, and so far has been resisting the temptation to do something, right? But he's going to have to do something. And I would not want to be in his shoes. It's not a job that I would want to have. I do think that a fellow with his Augustinian cast of mind, his training, he's a trained canon lawyer, has experience as a judge. He's been in the pastoral leadership of a diocese. He worked in Peru to help set up their safeguarding and victim outreach programs there. He is chastened because he's made mistakes, and they're out there. We know about them, right? So how's he going to do? My crystal ball is on the fritz. All right. But I think, and what I talk about in the book is laying out in what I hope is significant detail, and also, tracing and finding and keeping a through line for the cardinals, sort of their cast of mind, their deliberations, why they might have picked a guy like this. And I think when Cardinal Mamberti said his name, it clicked for me. I said, yeah, you know what? He does tick the boxes, right?
Yeah.
I had completely discounted him.
Why did you discount him? Did you do what I did? I discounted him because
American. He was born in the United States. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And I followed the wisdom that's widely attributed to Cardinal George, who, supposedly said that, roughly here, close paraphrase, no one would be elected from the United States to the See of Peter until the United States entered permanent political decline. And I say in the book that one takeaway from this is that, would-be readers of the Signs of the Times now have to decide whether the cardinals abandoned that piece of wisdom or whether we've seen it confirmed.
Yeah.
But the reason he thought that was that it's a combination of hard power and soft power, of geopolitical clout and spiritual auctoritas, that isn't good for either side of that, right? There's sort of echoes of Avignon, if you will, and. Although it bears mention that the papacy went to Avignon because Avignon at the time was part of the Holy Roman Empire, wasn't part of the Kingdom of France. Whole series of considerations to make on that point. France was the rising power in Europe. It's an instructive episode, but we won't go on that tangent. How's that?
That's a long tangent.
That's a long tangent.
Right, yeah. Feels like it could be an episode on the History Channel, so fair enough.
Well, the 90s History Channel, though, not ancient aliens and.
I was going to say,
right,
Chris,
sure,
don't. If
enough.
You start talking about aliens, I'm out. All right, so
if you start
Leo
talking about
coming.
aliens, I'm only more in. So
We have Leo coming into this situation in the life of the church that is, I think you hit the nail on the head, Chris, with the governance crisis and the justice crisis that we have. But I wonder, do you have the sense that Pope Leo is feeling I think it's kind of what you're alluding to, the communications crisis in the church, not so much about how we communicate the gospel, not so much about how we evangelize cultures and peoples, but more just about how when the church communicates something, it's understood or received. And we're even seeing that just recently. The U.S. bishops put out their statement on immigration, and you have, I can't think of his name, but this government official who's saying the Catholic Church is wrong about this. And, well, it's the U.S. Conference of Catholic
Tom
Bishops.
Homan,
Yeah. But also the bishops simply restated what the church teaches about nations securing borders, and that there's justice that needs to be done for all people, regardless of their particular status in a place they have human rights. There wasn't anything especially earth-shattering about it, but we've gotten to this point where we don't have a global media outside of the Catholic world that understands what Catholic language is. And so how much do you think this weighs on Pope Leo, that he's got a world that doesn't understand how he's going to communicate? And I think maybe we've even already seen it a little bit with he started to do the little talking to reporters as he goes in and out of Castle Gandolfo.
Yeah.
And I tend to the Ed Condon opinion of that's a bad idea and he shouldn't do it. But I'm just kind of curious, what do you see there?
I do think it's interesting. Look, those Tuesday gaggles are great for copy. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna fudge about that point, right? Now, if I were to take off my hack hat and put on a flak hat, and if I were advising him, my advice probably wouldn't be too terribly different from that which Ed Condon has expressed. But that's a different thing. I don't know whether you've ever heard the story about then Father Foley.
No.
And Archbishop Kroll.
No, but I love a good story about his foliness.
This is so. But both archbishops of Philadelphia eventually, right? Kroll was eventually a cardinal. I think he was not yet. He hadn't yet received his red hat. And then Father Foley was the editor of the Archdiocesan newspaper and was accompanying the Archbishop on a trip to the Middle East. And somewhere in the Middle East, someone had given, invited Kroll to get up on a camel, and he was wearing, I think, don't quote me on this, I may be gilding the lily a little. I don't have the picture in front of me, but there is a picture of it, sort of wearing a keffiyeh, which everybody does in the desert, because it's a, right? And Kroll asked Foley, well, what do you think I should do it? And he said, yeah, I don't think it's a great idea. And Kroll said, I'm going to do it. And so he hopped up on the camel, and Foley snapped the picture. And, the picture made the rounds in the papers and caused something of a sensation, right? Because it was an easy thing to politicize. And later on, Kroll asked him, why'd you take the picture? You told me not to get on the thing. Look what happened. And he said, yeah, that's why I told you not to take the picture. Or that's why I told you not to get on the camel. Well, when you asked me what to do, I gave you my best advice as your priest. When you got on the camel, I was a journalist.
Oh, that's a good hat change. I'm and no pun intended with the keffiyeh, but I'm impressed there. I always liked Cardinal Foley. Father Foley becomes, of course, Cardinal Foley, both for the voice. He did the
he had a great voice,
English language commentary. Oh, beautiful. For
the
all
Christmas, the midnight mass, all those years. Oh boy.
Oh, and that like deep baritone. It was beautiful. But also he's very near and dear to my classmates at the seminary because he ordained them to the transitional diaconate. And then when he was named a cardinal not too long after that, we had the big celebration. I was in charge of his reception line. So I got to stand there and hand people the Cardinal Foley card. The authentic trading card and everything as they came up, and they got to greet him. And when they had been there long enough, my job was to hand them a card and say thank you so much for being here, and just politely usher them out of the way so the next person could step up. And it was pretty fun. I gotta say it was kind of a fun gig.
Yeah, well, it's neat to be in a situation like that where you're getting to see a little bit of history happen, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It was cool. But all right, let's bring it back here to this reform. The justice piece. I want to come back to this because I don't know. My sense as a pastor is that we often get caught up in the big hot button issue questions. We get caught up in these things about, well, the church should do this, the church should teach this, the church should change this teaching. And number one, I would say Leo XIV does not in any way, shape, or form strike me as a hot button issue kind of a guy, nor does he strike me as somebody who's especially interested in changing what the church teaches about anything. As you point out in the book, and as you've also pointed out in a lot of your copy, he's very much an institutionalist in the sense of he understands that the church as an institution matters for the proclamation of the gospel, and so we need this institution if we're going to further that mission. But what I don't think really gets quite enough attention is this element of the church. If we talk about, and we've talked about this in the past here on the tangent with you, Chris, the church is a societas perfecta, as Robert Bellarmine says. So it's a real society, and a real society has to be governed. The governance part is not the fun part. It's not the exciting part. It's really exciting when you've got a Francis Xavier who's going out and baptizing thousands upon thousands of people everywhere he goes. It's really fun when you've got a Fulton Sheen who's commanding the airwaves and the media and is able to proclaim the gospel so effectively. It's not really fun when you've got well, we need to have this policy in place or this rule in place, or we need to make a decision about who's in charge of this.
Yeah, and Bishop Sheen's a great example, right? Because he was a magnificent evangelist. As Bishop of Rochester,
not so great.
Not so great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've had decades of leadership that's been very good at grabbing headlines out of Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And, John Paul II made the papacy, the papal office, right, a spectacular office.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he had a sense of the urgency of the moment and seized it with great alacrity. That's not a criticism of what he did. It's to say, while he was trotting the globe and inspiring millions of people, the curia, well, look, when cat's away, mice will play.
Mm.
All right, that's a fact of human nature, and I hear there's a lot of that going around.
Well, and maybe this is one of the challenges too. Like we didn't know in such clarity. We know with much greater clarity today some of the shortcomings on the administrative side of John Paul II's pontificate. It doesn't mean he's not a saint or a good man or an effective evangelist.
He's a saint in heaven, and I have absolutely no doubt is a powerful intercessor for all of us, and I pray to him regularly, but it doesn't mean he governed well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you have the fallenness of human nature, and maybe this is like one thing that we should just mention, that priests are people too, and bishops are people, and cardinals are people, and as such, even people who are working for the church with this great mission to proclaim the gospel act like people sometimes. And sometimes people do things that they shouldn't do. Sometimes people treat people in ways that are poor. It might feel very obvious to say it, but that's one of the realities of life in the church, that if nothing else, it makes the bad behavior of clerics all the more scandalous because of the great mission that they've been entrusted with when they do things that they ought not do. But it's just, maybe sometimes worth reminding ourselves that this is the human side of that perfect society that is the church.
One of the ways that I put it in a theological register that, and one of the reasons I do feel a great affinity with Leo is that I'm a student of St. Augustine. My original plan was to do my doctoral work on St. Augustine of Hippo. I ended up writing on something else, but I consider myself Augustinian in cast of mind, right? And Augustine is the greatest father and doctor of the church when it comes to the elucidation of the drama of the soul, in its our greatness and our brokenness, right? And because he sees with just ruthless clarity the persistent effects of original sin. Which isn't to say he has a down on human nature. Sometimes Augustine gets painted as a pessimist. I think that's just absolutely wrong, although I understand why people, even people who study him, take him that way. It's to accentuate by counterpoint the greatness of our creation, of our nature, and of our destiny, and of the work of salvation that God has wrought in us. But it's his part to lead us there. Meanwhile, we mostly muddle.
We muddle on, soldier on.
So in the book you there's a whole chapter on his Augustinian roots, Pope Leo XIV's Augustinian roots, and you go into the city of God, which I have not read, so I'm going to screw up phrasing this. But you've got this juxtaposition of the city of God, and is it the city of man, or the earthly city?
The earthly city.
Okay, and it's like the interplay. As I was reading your book, I was like, wow, I have to go read City of God. I should probably finish Confessions first, since I have about 100 pages left and was supposed to read it for school and then had to quickly move on to a different spiritual classic. But regardless, right, it piqued my curiosity. Like, what's the interplay between these two, knowing that as a member of the mystical body of Christ, like I'm already a citizen of the city of God in a way, right? And obviously I'm a citizen of the earthly city. There's no doubt about it, unfortunately. Right, but so, like, what's the interplay? How does that then inform his style of governance, right? With that Augustinian root in mind.
Do you remember that part in the Confessions? I want to say it's in book 5, where Augustine says something to the effect of, "It was then that I discovered I had two wills, the one old, the other new, the former carnal, the new one spiritual."
I'm going to be honest with you.
And in their railings, and he says, "And in their railings against one another, they laid waste my soul." The city of God is a developed theology of history that is rooted in that anthropological insight.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
That's why they pay me the big money, fellas.
Yeah.
So then that anthropology, then, I mean, surely that's going to inform the governance style, right? Like, you see that. So now I'm going past the time I had been paying attention, which I realize is it's a brief sample size, you know, it's a small sample size, but and so I'm looking for a history lesson to an extent, I guess. It seems to me like this Catholic anthropology, forged by John Paul II, it didn't begin with John Paul II, but it came into the limelight with John Paul II, you know, and so this, well, the style of approaching people through that lens was with him, right? I don't know. I guess I'm just asking how it'll impact the way that Leo tries to reach the church.
I think it will give him a sense of I hope it will give him a sense of the possible.
Okay. What's that mean? That's why they pay me the small bucks. No, I'm kidding.
No, it's an excellent question. What does it mean? I think we have to wait and see, right?
Okay.
But let me put it to you this way, okay? And you guys have been involved with talking with young people. You've been involved with ministry to people at every stage and from every walk of life, all right? There is and it's something cultural these days, and it's something that's learned, and it's something that we didn't used to do as much of. But there's a sort of an invasion of binary thinking, right? Mm-hmm. Of either or thinking, right? either man is fundamentally good or man is a mess and can't be fixed. Augustine says, if I could put it this way anachronistically and borrow a line from the clip that has been memeified from a TV ad, I can't remember for what. ¿Por qué no los dos?
It's for taco shells, I think.
Taco shells. I'm not mistaken. Is it for taco shells?
I think it's Old El Paso taco shells. ¿Por qué no los dos? Yeah.
That's a previous tangent reference too, actually.
Why not have both, right? Yeah, and in fact, we need both.
Yeah. And
it makes me think of was it at the end of Prince Caspian that Aslan says or it could have been at the end of, I've got to look it up. And I really ought to be able to do this. But
why not both?
That Aslan says to the King of Narnia, and it could be at the end of The Silver Chair, now that I think about it, but I'll have to look it up. He says, roughly, you are a son of Adam, and there is glory and shame enough in that.
Well, that's a good line. I mean, Lewis is capturing so much in everything that he writes, like really bringing in those mysteries there.
Right. That's the Augustinian worldview.
Right.
And we do our best. The purpose of government is to, create and sustain the possibilities, the possibility of human flourishing. It is, and part of that is restraining our wickedness and punishing evil, teaching what is good, and creating safety, security, and opportunity for the exercise of the virtues. All that is easier said than done when you're dealing with creatures that are, especially when you're dealing with creatures that need it, right?
Right. That experience concupiscence.
Yeah. And not just as, a momentary temptation, but who are concupiscent.
Right.
And are, spiritual warfare is a thing. One of the really amazing things about Christian life is that we really only get into it when we recognize that we are constantly, in every moment of every day, waking or sleeping, playing out matters of eternal life and eternal death. And then we realize it, and then the really amazing thing happens, which is we get on with our lives.
Right.
So speaking of getting on with life here, I think we've got it's reminding me of the unfinished business portion of your book, because what I was really fascinated by is as we get to the end, the unfinished business, the things that are sort of still left waiting. But since the time that this book's been published, we've already started to see some of that coming true or like resolving.
The unfinished business is being finished.
Yeah. Well, like Matt and I we talked recently about Dilexite and unfinished business. Here's something left on the desk And
so it's
Leo
it's
seems to
really
have finished
interesting,
it.
right? So
Yeah.
to one of the ththings that, so first of all, going back to something you said earlier, that it's a thread that I wanted to pick up. I wouldn't want anyone to get the impression that Leo is a shrinking violet, because he's not, right? He's in those press gaggles. He said some things, right? But he speaks very clearly. And he seems to be sensible of the fact that every word of his matters. And I appreciate that. He doesn't only speak so as to be understood, but to make it difficult for him to be misunderstood. And
that's fantastic.
He does not have that in common with his immediate predecessor.
Right.
Different strokes. All right. It's a fact, and it was exhausting. Right.
That's a funny way of putting that.
No, it was hard with Francis, like constantly feeling like he said something, and I don't know if he meant to say that, or if you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. We could do a whole thing here, and we definitely don't have time for this
channeling
tangent,
our inner Inigo Montoya.
Exactly. Like synodality has been that was the word. I don't think anybody knows what it means. And then
that is, I would love to hear what Pope Leo has to say about
he has been a study in not saying it.
He has been very careful about it, and he understands that part of what he has to do is give this idea form, give it shape, give it substance and form, right? Give it real contours and real substance.
Yeah.
And we're gonna see what that is. But it's gonna take a minute. I think we do need to be patient. He does seem to be very willing to let the unfinished business of the Francis pontificate play out, whether it's with the publication of De Lexite, going through with several of the appointments that were in the works. And we're seeing him. He's letting this the Jubilee year of hope close itself out. But then January 7th, there's a consistory.
That's the day after the Jubilee closes, right?
That's the day after the Jubilee closes.
Yeah.
He could have pushed it out a week. He didn't.
No. Now, and I think reading his catecheses during the Jubilee of Hope and some of the things that he's been saying, he is fully invested, it seems to me, in the Jubilee and in the idea of the message of hope and the importance of hope. And he has definitely carried it forward in a beautiful way, I think. But it's something that was coming up for me before we were talking about the sort of the both and tension that we live in. And it brings up for me this most recent story, or not most recent, but a recent story with which you referenced before. When the Rupnik scandal was brought up by a journalist, he talked about the difficulty of asking victims to be patient, and the challenge of the wheels of justice that need to turn. And part of that is complicated by the fact that it's been so long that this injustice has gone on. And so we have this tension, and he's acknowledging both and trying, granted that it's not his he has to follow I don't really even know how to phrase it. Like, he's got to follow. He could snap his fingers and just say, "You're out, buddy." And I think there's probably a lot of people who would like for that to happen, but that's also not what justice really has to be. And that's where we start to, I think, struggle and really wrestle with the concept of justice. So I thought that his statement there was actually a very important one and a very telling one.
It was, I can tell you, it was awfully tough for victims to hear. And
I would imagine it has to be.
It was tough for people who are there for survivors, for victims, for advocates. It was hard, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, it wasn't right as far as it went. And there is no, here's the thing, all right? There is no managing the Rupnik business. It has to play out, and it has to play out, unfortunately, under the highly imperfect conditions of ecclesiastical justice in the moment, because one of the things that Francis did, not with ecclesiastical trials that we know of, but with, although I should qualified no to that, and I'll come back to it, because he did extrajudicially laicize a few people, including Karadima, by the way, and a couple of other Chilean bishops. But that's another story. In the Vatican City civil trial of Cardinal Becciu, right? He changed the law to make it possible to prosecute him under Vatican City law, and then made a bunch of procedural changes. And whether those were prudent or defensible or reasonable things to do isn't the issue. The point is, you have the direct intervention of the chief executive with skin in the game, whose own conduct is not a matter of indifference to the trial.
Right.
Right. Doing things to affect the course of justice. It's not a it's not a great look, right?
Yeah.
You can't, if the Pope starts doing that with trials at canon law, it just cannot have, whatever happens will not have the semblance of justice.
How much, if any, effect do you think that Pope Francis's approach to justice and those little interventions that he would, little is a poor qualifier there, I shouldn't say it that way, but the interventions that he would make in different judicial processes in the life of the church, how much do you think, or do you think that it will affect what people expect of Pope Leo XIV? Or will Leo be very much his own man in this?
I expect him to be very much his own man. And I don't know that there was anybody better in the college to handle this particular situation or the project of reform. But that doesn't mean that he's going to do well. We have to wait and see. And it's an unholy mess.
Yeah.
That said, there are things that he could do to make the process more transparent without putting his fingers on the scales, without manipulating the gears of justice, as it were, right?
Well, and one thing that I was grateful, you pointed this out recently in a piece. There's been a lot of talk about what to do with Rupnik art and what Father Rupnik created, and should that art be allowed. And you point out that if Leo is to do something about it, then it will be perceived, rightly or wrongly, or however you want to say it, as tipping the scales in favor of a particular verdict. And that's also not quite the way that the wheels of justice have to turn. We've got to make sure that that justice kind of plays out. So we've got this is one big issue, and then I'm looking at, and now that we've pointed out that the first consistory that Leo will have after the year of mercy, or the year of jubilee rather,
that's
ends.
the calling of all the cardinals together, correct?
Correct, and it's a consistory that's not going to create new cardinals.
Okay.
Right. So some consistories have new cardinals being named, others
Right.
don't. This one is just
So
the
the
meeting
intention
of the
this
cardinals.
is that they get to know each other.
Yeah, exactly. And for the Pope to be able to ask their counsel on things.
I see, okay.
So what I'm kind of curious about here, Chris, is as it is customary for when the Pope dies, everybody who's prefect of a dicastery or a congregation, technically speaking, ceases in their role, with like one or two exceptions. I can't think of what it is.
The major penitentiary is one.
Yes.
And the Cardinal Chamberlain, the Camerlenio.
Yeah. So they otherwise cease their functions, but then the new Pope, can either confirm them all in their role, or can say thank you very much, time to move on. Do you think that in January or the few months that follow, we're going to see a few thank you very much for your service, here's the door, of certain heads of different dicasteries, or do you think it'll kind of stay status quo because Leo is a methodical and patient man?
He is a methodical and patient man. But first of all, I'm going to say two things here. All right. Real reform requires blood on the floor.
This is why I loved reading your book. These phrases, they're gold.
All right. It just does. That's the nature of the beast. It's human nature, and it's institutional nature, and it's part of it. Leo is doing his utmost to keep that to a minimum. He wants to preserve what he can of his predecessor's legacy. He is not interested in embarrassing people, and is not interested in, and in fact, has appeared to me, at any rate, at some pains to avoid spectacle. And I appreciate all of that. All right. Yeah. That said, there are, he's going to have to make some changes. There are quite a few dicasteries, the heads of which are coming up on 80, right? Right now, off the top of my head, sorry, I'm tired and it's been a long day. I know that Cardinal Czerny is one.
Okay. Which dicastery is he the head of?
He is the head of the Justice, Peace, Integral Human Development dicastery. One of the first, I think the first sort of super dicastery conglomerates that Francis created, even before he promulgated the sweeping curial reform law. And there are a few others as well. He's made his appointment to the Congregation for Bishops, where he was the head. That was vacant because the guy who used to be in that job got another one. Yeah.
That's an interesting one because I know that there were a lot of eyes on that, and it doesn't seem to have made much wave.
Yeah, there was institutional consistency, right?
Yes.
Now, I think that there were probably quite a few appointments in the works already. There are lots of reasons that could make sense. Leo also has a reasonable handle on that particular department, having been in it for a couple of years himself, right?
Sure.
So it wasn't terribly surprising, we're going to see. He hasn't really made any appointments of his own yet. Yeah. So we're gonna have to see.
This is the interesting piece.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that he's being patient? I know we're saying that he's being he's taking his time with it, right? But I mean, January 7th, that would be like 8-9 months, no? Wouldn't it? We could still say, okay, he did it in January. He waited almost a full year. So it wouldn't be a sign of impatience.
I think that's very fair. That he's definitely been patient, and I can appreciate that. What Chris was saying before, that tendency to think I have to do something, I have to act on this or something. That is a real temptation, and sometimes the best thing is to wait. And he really does seem very, very patient and calm. It's part of what I think is making Pope Leo really stand out so much is he has that patience. He has an authenticity too about him, right? This is a guy you get the sense he is who he seems to be, and he's stepped into the office as Pope, but he's very much himself even as he is Pope. So his difference will be interesting. I guess the only other question I have,
that's also wrapped up in the lack of spectacle too. Right, like the lack of theater. And
I mean, he did make
that
that great one-handed catch when the kid threw him something and demonstrated
enough.
his chops
and there
as a
have been
baseball
some
player.
pretty funny things I found on Instagram. I think I sent one to you, Father Sam, where someone had taken was taking a video. I'm assuming it was during either an audience or mass.
Yeah, that was during
and he
an audience,
happened to look, to the left and kind of gave him a head nod, like what's up, which was great. But that lack of theater is also so refreshing in the internet age. Like, what a way to set a great example, because he has been vocal about not letting, quote unquote, the algorithm write your life.
Yeah.
And the temptation to do that, I think, stems from this desire to be theatrical and get the attention. And he just doesn't do that. So it's like he's not just leading by word, he's leading by example.
I thought his remarks to young people about AI specifically the other night were very much to the point. And, in my day job, I could tell you that it's quite a challenge. Now I have more of a dog in that fight than I'm not exactly an impartial observer. But then again, I mean, here it's worth making a fine distinction between being fair and being impartial, right? Because those are two very, very different things. And it is sometimes possible and sometimes it's always necessary to be fair. It's also sometimes necessary to take a side. And that's a delicate balancing act. Governors are called to do this all the time, right? Judges have to do their work without fear or favor. To go back to the earlier part of the discussion. Two things occur to me, and I guess some of the guys who are coming up, they're coming up on or have just turned 77, right? So they're past, they're cardinals who are past the age of 75 and have stayed on long enough, right? Some of the remarks that Leo has made recently have suggested that he is getting ready for some sweeping generational change, right? So do I think that he's going to be giving guys their papers on January 7th? Perhaps not, but he's going to lay out his plans. And, maybe they'll get their papers beforehand. Maybe they'll get them after. We'll see. He strikes me as an educator. He has the patience of an educator. Whether that is something that he will be able to temper with the alacrity in decision making, or to combine with the alacrity in decision making that governance requires, we'll see. But you were quite right, especially when you're talking about the AI, that he has appeared to be and not shrinking from the limelight, but eschewing spectacle and speaking plainly. Very much with the poise of a practiced educator, and I admire that. I like it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to elaborate on what you meant by did you say the patience of an educator? I know you just said poise of an educator, but
the patience of an educator.
Well, what does it mean that he strikes you as an educator? What do you mean by that? Which characteristics?
He doesn't mind repeating himself. He is he's very sensible of the audience to which he's speaking. He says one thing, right? Sometimes you'll have a fella who has lots of interesting things to say and maybe even lots of great ideas. And then we'll try to cram them all into 30 minutes.
Right, yeah.
And nobody comes away
edified
with anything, right?
Yeah.
So as a teacher, what you want to do is have one idea.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Matt, do you remember when we had the conversation about the pilgrimage that I went on? And I was talking about how in English, Pope Leo spoke about asking all the pilgrims to pray the rosary daily during the month of October. And then he said it in Italian to different language groups, but the languages that he didn't speak. So he spoke in Italian, and so he repeated his desire for pilgrims to pray the rosary daily as a family during the month of October. But he repeated it more than once.
Portuguese as well, no?
Well, he said it to the Portuguese speakers. He didn't say it in Portuguese, but he did it in Spanish and English and in Italian. But multiple times he repeated the same thing. So to your point, Chris, his patience and ability to make the repetitions where necessary in order to drive home the point. I guess maybe the last thing here, Chris, would just be, as we're looking at these next couple of months, we've already started to see, I think, some of how Leo is going to face the challenges that you outline in your book. Given that the crystal ball is broken and that it's really hard to predict what's coming next, are there any other areas that we haven't had a chance yet to talk about that this is where Pope Leo is going to need to take a stand or take some action, considering those areas that are outside of the current event sphere of geopolitics, or those things that are outside the area of here's a new fire that needs to be put out or something. If we're thinking more just the broad strokes of church life, he's got the unfinished business that he seems to be tying up from the pontificate of Francis. How long is that Francis shadow going to last, and where does Leo need to start focusing attention and energy next?
It seems to me that he has already given us what will be the focus of his teaching pontificate, right? And you guys talked about it earlier. The reason he chose the name Leo was recalling two of the great Leos, right? Leo the Great, the original and best, right? And also his more recent predecessor, Leo the 13th. Because he senses, I think, that we are at a civilizational crossroads, which recalls us to Leo the Great, right? We're at a moment of danger, opportunity, adventure. But very much a crossroads. This is a crisis point. And he's compared it to the upheaval of the first industrial revolution. I don't think he's wrong about that. I think he's one of the very few people who see it very clearly and have been willing to call it by name. And that's an extraordinary frankness and forthrightness that also, I think, offers us a ready interpretative key to everything that he does.
Is that key rerum novarum?
Yes and no. And he has explained that again himself, right? That the great genius of rerum novarum, the first social encyclical of the modern era, right? Which was very much a document of its time. All right, let's be clear about that. But it was its retrieval and recovery and representation of the perennial truths of anthropology, of which the church has always been a champion and a carrier, that make it relevant today and perennially relevant, right? But since it was addressing problems that are not those of ours, the programmatic parts of it, those are things that are not so readily simply lifted out of their context and applied to the present, right? What we need is a recovery of the church's expertise on human nature. And that is where he is pointing. He said something really remarkable to the young people the other night at the thing that Katie Pre-John McGrady did a great job hosting it. I watched it. Yeah, that one.
NCYC.
He talked about the need to be in reality. And he feels, I think, very keenly and is sensible of the depth and extent of our alienation that is the result, or is exacerbated by technological development, and by technological displacement of humanity, right? But that isn't simply reducible thereto, right? There is an unfulfilled longing in the human heart that only God, who is the ultimate reality, can fill. And we meet him in each other, or we don't meet him. That's a great and terrible mystery. And it's one that he wants us squarely and without stint to face and outface. And I get the impression that he thinks that with God's help we can do it, and that's refreshing.
So is it fair to say then that he has?
In any case, it's it's worth failing spectacularly.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that he views isolation as a great danger in the modern era?
Yes. And the remedy is cultivating our capacity for fellowship. He's talked about that, and I wouldn't fall out of my chair to hear him talk a great deal more about it.
I mean, and that's Augustinian, right? Like, doesn't
absolutely.
Augustine, he has that whole part in the Confessions that I actually happen to remember this time, which is his friend passes away, and he talks about how he and his friend were like one, right? So like this Augustinian view of friendship is something that's
we were
getting
one soul in two bodies
disassembled.
almost, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, what is? I mean, even this, right? Like, it's different that we're doing this virtually. It would be different if we were doing it in person. You know. Yeah. That like, I would have to think more about it before I actually put forth anything of substance.
Well, it seems like
My
Leo there
students
captures something of like the John Paul II legacy that were made
That's
for
why
communion.
I was saying before. Does it start with him? You know, I
Yeah.
know that I'm uninformed on that point. I was genuinely asking as
Well,
a student there.
There's
Well, I think it starts with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, if I may.
Yeah. That's come on now.
Fair enough.
You walked into that one, man.
All right. Pulling the God card. Okay.
Who said, remember, risen from the dead, walking into a room that was, supposedly hermetically sealed and saying, "Peace be with you," which were also Leo's first words.
Right.
That's not nothing.
Yeah.
But, peace in the mouth of an Augustinian means a great deal, right? And when Leo, because, peace is the presence of justice. It is Augustine's phrase is tranquillitas ordinis, the tranquility of order. Order in our affairs, yes, but also, and at the same time, order in our souls. And to achieve order in the soul is the work of a lifetime, and ultimately it's the work of grace in us that carries us, that will ultimately only be completed in eternity. We hope happy eternity. Mm-hmm. Right? So he's aware of all of this. And not only notionally, his whole way of life is steeped in it. And that can't help but inform the way that he governs, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I keep looking at him, and I'm right on the cover of your book. He's there holding that pastoral staff, that crozier that John Paul II so famously carried for so many years. And this notion of the human person made for communion, and this ordering of our lives towards peace, it seems like there's a sort of a picking up of that legacy, while at the same time recognizing that it's not just the legacy of John Paul II. To the point, it goes back to Christ himself. But that
Don't make that mistake, Father Sam.
No, I won't. I can't make that mistake now. I've been taught. But that it also this is sort of facing it in a way. And again, this brings me to just that point of Leo as an institutionalist. I don't think he's one who's going to discard what has come before him very easily, which perhaps would be the thing that could be frustrating in some cases if you're looking at I think a lot of people got very frustrated with the Francis mode of doing things after a while and would like to see it completely discarded. And there are some out there who would like the entire memory just kind of wiped clean. But Leo's not going to do that. He's going to respect that legacy as well. Again, because he's an institutionalist who understands that these are all things that actually can build on one another. And even if the building did not make much progress, even if the project itself may have felt like it stalled for a little while, there's still something that can be drawn from that. There's still goodness that is to be had. So we've got a lot of good there.
I can't remember which, right now off the top of my head, which king of which conquered people supposedly said to the Roman conqueror, I don't think it was Vercingetorix, the head of the Gauls. It was, but it doesn't matter. The line was, you create a wasteland and you call it peace. He's not going to create a wasteland in the name of peace. Okay. And I know that that's going to be, disappointing to some people, and I don't know what to tell you. Frankly, it never is the answer.
Right.
And the really hard and painstaking work of retrieving the core, which has to be some expression of the core of our faith, and recognizing that look, history happens. Okay? History always happens. History is happening right now. And history is always messy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a fact. I think I say in the book somewhere something to the effect that anyone who reads the Acts of the Apostles and treats it as though it were a vademecum for good government is doing it wrong.
We'll just hope that every once in a while the floor opens up and swallows people who've just been struck dead because they didn't give everything that they were supposed to give.
Right.
Yeah. And it's okay for priests to just bore people to death so that they fall out of windows and die, and then go out and say, pick them up and fix them. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Acts of the Apostles is not the vademecum for good governance. I love it. Well, listen, Chris, this is amazing. I'm really grateful for your time. We've taken up a lot of it. But the book is Leo XIV, The New Pope and Catholic Reform. It is available.
There it is. You really do have one. I'm gonna have to.
I really do have one, and I read the whole thing. It's available from Bloomsbury Continuum. Go check it out. It's a great read.
You'll find it in fine bookstores everywhere and available online. And remember, folks, Mrs. Altieri would be very sore with me if I didn't remind you that books make excellent stocking stuffers. They're wonderful Christmas gifts.
'Tis the season. Here we go.
Look,
Chris, thank you so much.
I'm here to help.
Really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on again. Thanks for watching today's video. Let us know what you thought down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.